We're joined by Bethan Winn, who's one of our guest presenters at the conference for Power Future 24 here at Skill Strategies International. Bethan, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm pleased to be here, Dave.
My pleasure. Now, before we can really dive in, and for the sake of our audience, can you just give us a little backstory? How did you come to this point in your life?
Oh, wow. How long have we got? Well, I'm a speaker and facilitator, and I focus on critical thinking, decision making, and problem solving. I've been doing this about 4 years. Prior to that, I was a teacher at UWA, and the transition kind of happened by accident, as all good things do.
Hmm.
I was teaching critical thinking to pre-masters students, so kind of mature students. And prior to that, I'd only really taught sort of English and communications and media. So I was in this whole new space, and I was like, wow, I'm getting a lot out of knowing more about critical thinking. And it was really helping me with personal decisions, challenges I was having. And I was talking to more and more people about it, and friends in business, in HR were like, wow, you need to make this more available to people. So it's kind of grown organically from there.
Yeah. And next question is, why critical thinking?
And, there's a reason why philosophers have been talking about this stuff for aeons before I was.
Hmm.
It's very practical, very just transferable to like home life, personal challenges, to work. And I see critical thinking as three things: it's skills, it's knowledge, and it's attitudes. So I think a lot of people have the attitude, know that it's important to be open-minded, to be curious, to be open to possibilities. And the things that I work with people on are the skills, and remembering to use those skills when the going gets tough. I think often when we're under pressure, we forget how to take a step back, take a deep breath, look at the bigger picture, think long term, things like that. And then the knowledge, things like cognitive biases, logical fallacies are so useful. They sound a bit out there and will be unfamiliar to lots of people, but once you know them, you can spot them everywhere. And then they're so applicable to lots of different contexts. So for the conference, we'll be talking about it in relation to ownership and some of the assumptions that we make about what we're allowed to do, what we're capable of doing, and pushing outside of your comfort zone a little bit.
Fantastic. And the other question is what's the difference between, say, critical thinking and outright skepticism?
Oh, good question. Oh, look, there's definitely, if we were to draw a Venn diagram, there's definitely some similarities. But it's funny, my neighbors, they say, what do you do? And I say, oh, critical thinking. And they're like, oh, is that criticizing things? And it's not necessarily that. You don't
No.
have to be negative. And I think a bit of skepticism is healthy, asking
Mm.
questions. So perhaps they're two sides of the same coin.
Okay. Yeah. And how can we cultivate a culture of critical thinking more in the classroom? Because this obviously getting listed by a lot of teachers.
Yeah, a lot of it for students, I think it's reminding them, and we kind of know this anyway, right? But we all will have a reactive part of our brain. If we think of Daniel Kahneman's work on system one and system two thinking, your
Mm.
system one is your like automatic reactive, like, just, oh my God, I'm outraged, or that's awful. We've all done it. You're scrolling through and some clickbait headline has you going, oh, this is disgusting. And it's trying to encourage people to take that step back, take a moment, pause, respond from a more logical part of our brain. And, that does require a pause, a reflection, and getting curious enough to dig into it. So if it's a headline that looks really outrageous, it's often worth kind of following through and going, what's the actual story here? And
Mm.
I'm horrified by the number of headlines that I'll read. And once you read the article, you realize there's actually very little correlation even between the two things. But because we're in this attention economy and,
Yeah.
educating our students and all of us about this, how much we pay with our time and attention to some stuff like, the headlines or whatever is our doom scrolling thing of choice. And then, applying that to things people say. Our default is to believe people when they tell us anything. So like you were saying before, sometimes it's useful to just take a moment. If it doesn't feel right, trust our gut instinct and get curious about what's actually going on.
Yeah, I guess too, the technology really does hinder the critical thinking process because we just, you just
Yeah,
said, we just doom scroll, and I think we need a little bit more well, asking the right
absolutely.
questions. Yeah.
And encouraging all of us to get out of our echo chambers. So in the way that, where we hang out online or in person, we will generally be around people who think like us. And then every so often you have a conversation and you go, oh wow, like I forgot there's people that think completely the
Differently.
opposite
Yeah.
of me. Yeah, yeah. And having a conversation with the human being, not just dismissing them because you've got one point of difference, because usually you'll find if you have a proper conversation and dig in that we're more alike than we realize, and making assumptions about people, making snap judgments based on like a tiny part of what you see of them is not helpful to anyone. And we're seeing more and more division in society, and I think critical
Hmm.
thinking and curiosity is so important to try and reach a bit more of a balanced, harmonious place, because
Yeah.
it's not us and them, it's all of us together in whatever it
Hmm.
might be.
That brings me on to the next point. How important is having that community connection? How important it is to be realize that we are social animals. We need to be around others to bring joy to our
Oh
lives.
my God. I'm so passionate about community. And that's, it's funny, that's something that I sometimes end up speaking on, because I do feel so strongly that it's not only important for us on a sort of mental health aspect, on just being part of a tribe. We all feel the need to belong to something. We want to feel seen, heard, and valued. And one of the ways we do that is by being helpful to each other
Hmm.
and useful to others around us. And for example, my strata community, we're like a sort of accidental intergenerational experiment, because we've got everything from, I think 96 is the eldest, down
Wow.
to 2 years old. So even just in the villas here, I know how much I've gained from having, that regular contact and interesting conversations with people from different backgrounds, different generations. It's been life changing. And it took a while to realize, my husband and I, why we loved it here so much. But I kind of
Hmm.
believe that this is how human beings are meant to live. We're not meant to live in isolation and separate from whatever our tribe is, whatever that looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of which, what can our attendees of the conference really expect from your presentation?
Okay, so one of the focuses will be on ownership. And I
Hmm.
suppose this feeds nicely into that community conversation. I'm going to butcher the quote, but there's something by JFK along the lines of, I realized something needed to be done. And then I realized that I was someone who could do that. So I think it is, if we can find ways to be what we refer to as above the line in our behaviors. So take ownership, accountability, responsibility, rather than below the line, falling to blame, excuse, denial, because it's so easy to put yourself in a disempowered state and almost portray yourself, even just to you, as the victim of a particular situation. But actually, that means you can't do anything if you're just blaming someone else. Whereas that above the line stuff, if we can take ownership, we can see a way forward, even if we can't necessarily change the world or have a massive impact on the thing that we're worried about. I often talk about nibble rather than scoff. Like, there's small
Hmm.
changes we can chip away. So even if you say, oh, I can't do anything, there's always something. And once we realize that we're much more capable than we believe ourselves to be, then we can create that momentum and build our own confidence to start to challenge whatever it is that we, care enough about to put our energy into.
Fantastic. And is there anything I didn't ask but should?
Oh gosh, wow. I don't know. It was your job to come up with the questions. I always have the questions.
Uh,
I don't know. So always one of my favorite questions is to ask, what assumptions have we made? So there'll probably be a way to bring that in and get people thinking about how do they challenge their own beliefs. Never ceases to amaze me, the confirmation bias. There's what's actually true, and then there's what we believe, and then the bits of that truth that we actually see, because we're open to those, different facts as opposed to the so there'll be a bit of that going on, I'm sure. But if anyone has any questions about critical thinking or would like to find out more, they're very welcome to reach out to me before the day or on the day, track me down. I think I'm around all day, so it's always wonderful to connect with fellow educators as well. As a former teacher, I know it's tough out there, and they do an amazing job.
Absolutely. And speaking of which, where else can our attendees find you before the conference itself? So where can we find you on interwebs?
On the interwebs. I'm active on LinkedIn and Instagram mostly. LinkedIn's the more professional. Instagram, you get a bit of behind the scenes. And my website, Bethan Winn, and also humanskills.com.au. Some of my resources for young professionals are on there as well.
Fantastic. Bethan, thank you very much for coming in this afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Look forward to the conference.
Yeah.